Please, John, open the door, John. Open the door, John! Open the door, John! Open the door! Let me talk to you, brother.
I'm currently hiding in my closet, and I need all the advice I can get. But you'll need some context as to why, so I'll give you some background details regarding how the hell I got myself into this situation. My brother and I don't have much in common at all. We don't hate each other, but as we got into our late teens, it felt we were more roommates than siblings. We'd see each other after school or work, ate together, ask how our respective days went and did our own thing. He'd retreat to his room to play guitar, and I'd retreat to my room to play games. In time, we both got acquired to going out with our friends at night. The unwritten tradition that was made was that whoever got home would check the room of the other to see if we made it home safe. Usually, it would be me checking on him, as me and my friends would stay out later. I was comfortable seeing my brother's head peek through the door while I dozed off. Until this weekend. My brother planned on heading out camping with his buddies for the weekend. Meanwhile, I was attending a music festival in town for my weekend. I had no interest in hosting after parties or taking girls home, so I planned on crashing at home each night. I had a new job starting Monday, so I decided I would do the music festival completely sober. The first night was a blast. Made it home at 1 a.m. and proceeded to plop down on the bed and let the good old slumber take me. I noticed the door began to crack open. Sure enough, I saw a head poke out from the open door. It was my brother, checking on me. I gave him the thumbs up. "Night, little bro," he said, backing away and closing the door behind him. Funny. Thought he'd be leaving that night. Was he only going camping for one night? I didn't think too much of it and dozed off. I woke to the sound of his Jeep taking off. He actually did stay the night here. The second night of the music festival went a little bit later. It was my favorite artist playing that night, and I wanted to weasel in backstage to see him, but to no avail. The Uber dropped me off at my place at around 1:45 a.m. My brain must have been on autopilot because I checked his room and saw nothing. Well, no crap, he was camping. I threw my clothes off and dropped into bed, turning on the AC unit. I was drifting off to sleep when I heard it. "Night, little bro," I heard a voice say. It sounded like my brother, but not quite. It sounded like there was a strange humming underneath it. I shot up, seeing my door cracked open. I heard footsteps that sounded clumsy right behind the door. "Wait," I demanded, probably waking up my parents in the process. The clumsy steps got closer to the door, and I saw my brother's head poke out. I wanted to be relieved, but something was different. His head was almost about to bump the door frame, if not the roof. My brother was never that tall. I regretted my decision and decided I would play dumb. Something was in the house, and I didn't want to make it mad. "I'm glad you're home," I nervously said. It stared at me, unblinking eyes that bored into my chest. "Of course. Night, little bro," it said to me. I could barely see its lips move. It closed the door behind it, and I tried to listen where the footsteps went. It seemed to vanish after reaching the end of the hall. I laid awake, thinking of what the hell I just saw. My parents were still in the house too. I wanted to ask them, but would they believe that a 21-year-old is seeing monsters in the house? I ended up falling asleep staring off into the rising sun. I had nowhere to be till later. So, I slept most of the morning and early afternoon, catching up on what sleep I lost. I asked my parents if they were moving around last night, to which my dad said he took a leak and heard me come home. Other than that, nothing from either of them. I held my tongue as to why I was asking, but I could tell they knew something was up. I also got in contact with my brother. He had stopped in town by the campground, so at least I knew he was alive. My friends thought I was secondhand high off something when I explained the situation to them. I initially wanted to opt out on the rave that night, but my parents insisted I'd go have fun, so I went. I made it home around 1:30 a.m. and immediately scoured the house, turning on all the lights save for my parents' bedroom and the main hallway. I didn't see anything, nor did I hear any clumsy footsteps looking for me. I made it home, I said as I got into the room, shutting the door as quickly and quietly as I could. I wanted to bait it out, but not loudly enough to wake up my parents. I turned off the lights in my room and waited. It didn't take long. I heard the clumsy footsteps appear from the end of the hallway, closing in on my room. I hid in the closet and waited for it to come inside. For extra measure, I put a spare blanket over the bed to give the illusion that I was there. My heartbeat was probably loud enough to wake up my parents as I saw the door crack open. I saw the thing impersonating my brother poke its head into my room. After not seeing me in my bed, the thing's neck stretched and twisted, making the most uncomfortable sounds. I couldn't make out the details of the body, but it was tall. Its neck extended almost 2 feet as it scanned the room. But the being itself never went fully inside my room, its head now touching the ceiling, rubbing against it like a snake on the side of a terrarium. As my eyes adjusted, I could eventually see a body with skin so saggy, it looked like it was melting off of its body standing just beyond the door. It was at least 8 feet. Then, it growled like a wild animal. I was about to scream, but I kept it together. Little, bro. Little. Its sagging arm reached over the door handle and it began to back away slowly, closing the door behind it. I haven't moved from the closet. I want to call the cops, even if it wakes up my parents. What the hell do I say, though? Has anyone had experiences with something like this? Will the police find anything? Or will it vanish as soon as someone comes to the door? Or worse, what if it attacks whoever steps inside? I haven't heard it leave yet. I still hear the muttering behind the door. Please, help me. My name is Mark, and this is the first entry of my journal. I'm a patient at St. Mary's Mental Hospital. I wanted to start by explaining why I'm here and what led me to insanity. It's still hard to talk about, but here we go. 3 years ago, I broke up with Joanne. Joanne was a nice person, but I lost attraction for her. Not that she was ugly or anything, I had it with her for some years. We were high school sweethearts, and she kind of grew out of her cute phase. I'm aware I'm a jerk for saying this. Even worse, I said it to her, which was a huge mistake. Joanne didn't have much self-esteem, you see, and breaking up with her because of her appearance completely destroyed her. In the following weeks, she went through all the 5 stages of grief. First came denial. She kept texting me and calling me. Hey, BB, is everything okay? You didn't mean it when you broke up, did you? Then came anger. She called me unholy names, keyed my car, etc. I was aware of how much of an ass I had been, so I let it go. Cue bargaining. She'd call me saying that she would lose weight, wear makeup, have surgery. None of that mattered, and by this time I was growing tired of her behavior. It was also around this time when I met Chloe. After this, I stopped hearing about Joanne. I assumed by then that the depression had set in, followed by acceptance. So Chloe, well, she was a beautiful woman. I met her at work, good old water cooler talk and whatnot. She had beautiful blue eyes, blonde hair, soft as silk, and her face looked like that of a doll. It didn't take long before I asked her out on a date. We started hanging out, and before you know it, we were a couple. Over the next few weeks, she started staying over, and I ended up giving her the key to my place. A few months passed, and everything was great until that day. I had been calling Chloe a whole day, but she hadn't picked up once. She wasn't at work either, and nobody had seen her since the day before. I had decided to go home after work and take a shower, change clothes, and head over to her house to check on her. When I got home, I immediately noticed something was wrong. My door was cracked open. I was sure I had locked it before leaving. When I got inside, there was something on the floor. I turned on the lights and I saw her. Chloe. She was laying face down on the floor in a puddle of blood. As I was reaching down to hold her, I heard a sound coming from the bedroom. I realized we weren't alone. Heading for the bedroom, I grabbed the baseball bat I had in the hallway. The bedroom door was slightly open. I pushed it slowly, looking into the room as I entered, but I couldn't see anyone. I went in, planning on checking the closets and then the windows. That's when I heard the door closing and locking behind me. As I turned, I can't ever forget what I saw. I let out a scream and threw up when I saw her. Behind me was Joanne, covered in blood. But that's not what caused my reaction. It was her face. Over her face, crudely sewn, was Chloe's. Am I beautiful now? About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go on long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent about 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had I reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommates that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning. I was walking near a police-patrolled park, quite a ways away from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic, almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him as much space that he needed to pass by me. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still, until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about a half block between us, I turned away from him for a moment and watched the sidewalk in front of me. The streets and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast, very fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time staring at him, and then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen as the smiling man crept toward me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to my mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the hell do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. What the? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance walking away, just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go, till he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time, he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off to the side of the road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for about another 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane, and that's a very, very scary thing to see.